Good evening, and welcome to the March 2024 Borough Board meeting. I am Gregory Lewis, counsel to Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso, joined by, to my right, Carol Ann Church, the Director of Community Boards here at the Office of Brooklyn Borough President, and Joseph Frizzell. This meeting is being recorded to comply with the Public Officers Law, and I am chairing it under a September 2022 order from the Borough President. Calling the meeting to order and asking Ms. Church please to call the roll.
Good evening. I'll start with community boards. Community Board 1.
Present.
Hi.
Gina.
Hi, Gina. Community Board 2. Hi, Tia. Community Board 3. Community Board 4.
Present there.
Thank you. Community Board 5.
President. Alice Tony.
Community Board 6. Where am I going to? Community Board 7.
Present.
Thank you. Community Board 8.
President Weatherspoon.
Thank you. Community Board 9. Thank you. Community Board 10. Community Board 11. Thank you. Community Board 12. Community Board 13.
Present.
Community Board 14.
President Carl Henry Cesar.
Thank you. Community Board 15.
Teresa Scavo, Chair, Present.
Thank you. Community Board 16. Community Board 17. Okay. Council members. District 33, Ressler. District 34, Gutierrez. District 35, Hudson. District 36, Osei. District 37, Nurse. Thank you. District 38, Aviles. District 39.
President Matthew Malloy.
I'm writing your name, Matthew. Thank you. District 40, Joseph. District 41, Mealy. Hi, Ayana. District 42, Banks. Michael. District 43, Zwang. District 44, Yeager. District 45, they sent in their apologies. District 46, Narcisse. District 47, Brennan. District 48, Vernikov. District 50, Carr. Hi, Justin. In Borough President's office, we're here.
We have a quorum. Circulated on February 20th by email, and again yesterday, was an email with a copy of the agenda. Any member not receive a copy of the agenda? The proposed agenda? Hearing that no one failed to receive a copy, does any member have an objection to adopting the proposed agenda circulated by email as the agenda for this meeting? Hearing no objection, the agenda circulated by email as the proposed agenda is adopted, duly adopted as the agenda for tonight's meeting. Circulated earlier this afternoon was a copy of the proposed minutes of the February 2024 Borough Board meeting. Did any member not receive a copy of the proposed minutes? Mindful of the short amount of time, I'll specifically emphasize here that you can object if you feel that there's not enough time, and we'll entertain motions. Does any member object to adopting the proposed February 2024 minutes of the Brooklyn Borough Board? Mr. Camacho, your objection. So you just object?
Tally got 5 in regards to the casting the vote for the voting on the city of yes. The tally was, you got 5, it was 6 yes. You got 7 no, which was 11, and you got 12 was abstaining. So correction in the minutes.
So you're moving to amend the minutes?
Yes, in regards to the calculation that y'all did roll call. And if you do it the tally now, you see that it's totally.
So to publish the motion, you're moving to amend the tally reflected in the proposed February 2024 minutes to reflect that there were 6 yes votes instead of 5. How many no votes instead of the number? No votes instead of 7?
12 abstention, and you got, if you do the tally,
So that's just in the last numbers to change the 11 to 12 abstentions.
yes, sir.
Is the motion second? Chairperson Mikadia, I'll recognize that Chairperson Mikadia second the motion. Let's do a roll call. Do a roll call vote, please. On this, we'll entertain Chairperson Camacho's amendment first, and then we'll get to yours, Chairperson Mikadia. So motion has been moved and second on a roll call vote on changing the tally.
Okay. Is there anyone here that wasn't in the room when the roll was called? No, you were here, Mike. I got you, Mike. Okay. CB1.
Yes.
CB2. CB3. CB4. CB5. CB6. CB7.
Yes.
CB8.
Yes.
CB9.
Same.
CB11. CB11. CB13.
Oh, abstain, sorry.
CB14.
Yes.
CB15.
Yes.
CB16. CB18 is not in the room. Council members, 35. 37. 38. 38. 39.
Yes.
41. Should I abstain?
Yes. Just to be clear, was that an abstention? Thank you.
42.
Yes.
45. Oh, sorry. And I think 50.
And the Borough President's Office abstains.
Can I get one?
When you asked if someone was here, then this roll call
Sasha? Sorry.
And your vote on the motion to, thank you. The measure passes. Yes, Chairperson Gotcha. Correct. So your motion has carried. The proposed minutes for the February 2024 meeting are now reflecting the tally that you stated. Sure, but we must make the typographical correction. So that motion has carried. The proposed minutes are now so amended. You have a proposed motion. Ms. Chairperson Mika Diaz.
The minutes indicate that I objected to the January 2024 board meeting minutes. I did not, I abstained.
Okay.
And my name is spelled incorrectly as well.
So a two-part motion to correct the spelling of your name and to record that you abstained from the January 2024 board minutes as opposed to objecting. Does any member object to that amendment, the amendment to correct the spelling of Chairperson Mika Diaz's name and to reflect that Chairperson Mika Diaz abstained from the vote on the January 2024 Borough Board minutes rather than objecting? Does any member object? Hearing no objection, that amendment is deemed reflected in the proposed minutes. Yes.
Henry Cesar, first vice chair, and designate to Chairwoman Brown.
Thank you.
I'm making an amendment on behalf of the minutes of February 16th.
Please.
Sure. So first proposed amendments are to the other business section regarding the participation of the meeting law. The request from the chairwoman is that certain bullets be highlighted that they were public comments and others be highlighted that they were from board members, specifically bullets 1 through 5, and then the 8th bullet highlighting that those comments were from the public, and then highlighting that bullets 6 and 7 were requests from board members.
A motion's been made to further amend the proposed February 2024 Borough Board minutes to highlight that comments 1 through 5 and 8 were made by members of the public and that the other bullet points were made by members of the Borough Board. Is there any objection to adopting that proposed amendment to the proposed February 2024 Borough Board minutes? Hearing no objection, the proposed amendment is reflected in the document of or the amendment rather, is reflected in the proposed minutes for the February 2024 Borough Board meeting. Does any other members have any other motion regarding the proposed minutes? Hearing no motions, does any member object to adopting the proposed minutes for February 2024 Borough Board meeting as amended here with the 3 amendments previously mentioned? Any objections? Hearing no objections, the proposed minutes as amended here at this meeting are adopted as the official minutes of the February 2024 Borough Board meeting. That moves us on to agenda item number 4, updates from Brooklyn Borough Hall. We don't have any updates. With one exception, actually. One quick update. The state of the borough that had previously been mentioned at the last meeting and scheduled for February, it had been moved or postponed because of weather. That meeting will take, the State of the Borough speech will now take place on March 13th at Metrotech. March 13th at Metrotech, the State of the Borough address by the Brooklyn Borough President. It's taking place actually at City Tech. I apologize, not Metrotech, at City Tech. It's going to be taking place March 13th at City Tech. That is the update from Borough Hall. Hope to see you all at the State of the Borough address. That moves us on to agenda item number 5. There is no unfinished business from the last Borough Board meeting, which then brings us to Agenda item number 6, communications and reports, and a public hearing matter. This is a public hearing relating to the Prospect Park Alliance's presentation of a 25-acre master plan concept and a more developed design for Phase 1 of the Lakeshore Waterfront Restoration Project. The note that Phase 1 received $3 million in funding from the Brooklyn delegation and Mayor Eric Adams, noting that the anticipated construction completion date is 2026, that the project aims to restore the shoreland to its historic precedent, improve American with Disabilities Act accessibility, and create more storm weather capacity. Before calling up Prospect Park to present, Chairperson Witherspoon, I see that you had your hand up.
Yes, I did. Under the unfinished business, I thought that the City of Yes economic opportunity was finished, so that's been closed.
Closed. There was a vote on the matter at the last meeting, and that's closed the discussion of the matter.
I do have this question. So, as I had mentioned before, we had a board meeting right after.
Right.
So, I believe we sent the information. So, I'm not sure if you received it, but I'd like to at least have it on record.
The short of it is, there are individuals who stated that at the time of the vote at the last meeting, their boards had voted, or other bodies had voted, and then there were statements, those were put into the record. If memory serves, I think this is reflected in the minutes, you had voted no on the basis that Community Board A did not have an opportunity to review and had not yet voted. That's recorded as for the Borough Board matter. Of course, the community boards individually got to weigh in. That would be part of the record. For purposes of the Borough Board, that vote was the official Borough Board record for Community Board A, but of course, in the broader discussion, it's part of the record. So that is why the matter is closed from the Borough Board's perspective. All right. Welcoming the Prospect Park Alliance and Lillian Liu for a presentation on the public hearing matter. Please take the podium.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lillian Liu, and I am an assistant landscape architect with Prospect Park Alliance. And today, we are presenting the master plan for the Lakeshore Waterfront Restoration Project, with the first phase fully funded by Brooklyn delegation and Mayor Eric Adams. The project runs from Wellhouse Drive around the west side of the lake and ends at the area labeled Phase 1. Everything east of this was restored 10 years ago when Lakeside Center was completed. Our goals are to restore the shoreline to Olmsted and Vox's original design intent, reduce flooding, and to improve ADA accessibility. PPA engaged in 2 hearing sessions with the community. We heard the following concerns, such as improving walkability, access to the water, and supporting wildlife, which are included in our scope. The lake also floods during major storm events, so a part of our scope is to improve stormwater management. We are working with DEP, who is currently studying the entire park. We hope to incorporate their recommendations in future phases. Phase 1 does not have a tendency to flood, which is why it was selected to be the first phase. This is the historic plan from 1874. The lake had many more islands, and the shoreline had more inlets and irregularly shaped peninsulas with a loop drive circling it. The area open on the right is where the current Levesque Center is. Over the course of history, many of the lake's inlets were filled, the islands were consolidated into the mainland, and the shore's edges were reinforced with concrete and cobble walls. And these are some historic photos of the shore's natural edges. And these are some photos of the walls after they were added. These images are of typical shoreline conditions. We have missing and inaccessible pavement, desire lines, and erosion and compaction due to foot traffic and flooding, phragmites, and broken retaining walls. And Wellhouse Drive, which is not original to Olmsted's plan, has a lot of impervious surfaces. And now we come to our master plan, starting with Phase 1 by the rustic shelter just south of the Levesque Center and south of Duck Island. The proposed design is shown on the right, the historic plan is shown on the left, and the current site is shown in the center. We are reintroducing 2 historic waterfront access points and bringing back inlets on either side of the peninsula to increase flood storage capacity, similar to Olmsted's plan. For this phase and the rest of the master plan, we are bringing the historic elements as closely as they were to their historic design. And because of the existing trees, the paths are staying where they are. Inlets are added around the existing trees, and the waterfront access points will be in the general locations of the historic ones. So now we are looking at the first of the 2 inlets. In order to continue the path over the inlet, we are proposing a timber walkway for uninterrupted circulation. The shoreline edge becomes soft and frequently inundated and planted with riparian plants to promote a more diverse habitat. Now we're looking at the first of the 2 waterfront access points. We are proposing granite slabs and Central Park settees, similar to what was installed at Dog Beach, which exists somewhere else in the park. Now looking at the second waterfront access point, we're proposing a much simpler approach with Central Park settees. And now we're out of phase 1, and we'll be showing the remainder of the master plan. So starting at the south end of the park, across from Three Sisters Island, we're adding a planted buffer within East Drive to reduce pavement and to capture stormwater. And along the shoreline by Three Sisters Island, we're introducing a historic waterfront. And then moving west to the Hammerhead Peninsula, we are bringing in more inlets and installing a timber walk. And moving further west to West Island, where it often floods, we are proposing a timber walk over a wetland. Then moving north to the northwest and southwest waterfront access points, we will be making improvements to those areas. And then lastly, at Wellhouse Drive, we will be reducing pavement. Now we will be looking at the renderings for those areas I just outlined. Looking at this area, it's by Three Sisters Island. We are reintroducing a bluestone terrace with 3 steps to the water's edge and adding more seating. Our next design area is the Hammerhead Peninsula. Our design is able to really cut in and sculpt the land similar to Olmsted's original design. And since we anticipate many of these peninsulas to flood, we are proposing an elevated timber walk over the wet areas. Now we're looking at the southern portion of East Drive, which is very wide now that the park is closed to car traffic. On the right side of this section, you'll see a planted buffer that we're proposing within the existing roadway to capture stormwater, as well as to provide respite for pedestrians for bikes and maintenance vehicles, from bikes and maintenance vehicles. And moving west to West Island, where it often floods, we're proposing a timber path over a wetland to capture stormwater. And moving to the northwest area of the plan, and first looking at the southwest waterfront, under existing conditions, the rustic shelter is surrounded by compacted soil where there's no accessible path to it. We're proposing paved paths leading to the structure, and seating will be installed at the water's edge, and the shoreline will be planted and retained by boulders. This is the northwest waterfront by Wellhouse Drive that currently has compacted soils and limited seating. We're proposing a larger viewing area that will be paved with bluestone, will include more seating, and will replant the shoreline's edge. And coming to the last part of our master plan design, this is Wellhouse Drive. Because this drive was originally not part of Olmsted's plan, and it's currently 55 feet wide, so we're proposing to reduce it down to 20 feet and increase more woodland on the north side. This is the rendering of the proposed drive with a reduced width. And these are some materials that we are proposing. They're materials already found in the park, except for the cellular concrete system, which we are proposing to use at the existing boat launch for our landscape maintenance crew. And we are proposing to use site furnishings already found in the park. And these are some samples of plants, native plants that we plan to use that can thrive in dry and inundated conditions so that we can support a variety of species that rely on the park. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Questions for Prospect Park Alliance? from the Borough Board members? Chairperson Baptiste.
Thank you very much for the presentation. What are the start and end dates of phase one and
I'm sorry.
start dates, start and end dates?
Oh, start dates. 2026 is what we anticipate to be the start date. Oh, I'm sorry. The question is, when is the anticipated start date for phase one? And the anticipated start date is about 2026. And the anticipated end date is 2027.
Yes.
Thank you, but in the notice, it actually says the completion date's going to be 2026. So just want to know, is the agenda incorrect, or is the start date, the completion date incorrect?
The anticipated start date is 2026, so the agenda needs to be updated.
Will anyone who, Borough Board member who's not had an opportunity to ask a question yet or make a comment before we go for round two? Seeing none, Chairperson Baptiste.
I think there were a couple of points during your presentation where you mentioned stormwater capture. When we say that, what happens to the stormwater? So is it a matter of places where it's been corrected and it soaks in naturally, or is it being corrected someplace else?
We have in the presentation areas that we are cutting into the land and creating more inlets. Those inlets will be more capacity to hold stormwater. And then there are also areas where we're proposing wetlands, and those areas will just be depressions in the land that will be dry, and whenever it storms, then water will pool in that area and hold and be stored in that area.
Any other questions from Borough Board members? Hearing no other questions, thank you very much, Ms. Liu. And we'll now then proceed as the agenda notes. This is a voting matter under Section 85 of the Charter because it is a proposal to improve land that borders more than one community district. The relevant, and as that section of the Charter also says, only those community boards that are affected by the item are allowed to vote. That is Community Board 6, 7, 8, 9, and 14. So when we call the vote, we will then specifically call for votes from those community boards and then the council members, and the matter will pass if a majority of those able to vote approve the matter. Before getting to that, Ms. Campbell.
Thank you very much. Since it's a public hearing, is this body accepting testimony regarding this project? I don't have a question, but I did have testimony that in support of the project on behalf of the city.
Borough Board members in the question session are also allowed to speak on the matter, so please, by all means, go ahead.
I'll summarize and then I'll submit my written testimony, but Community Board 14 is in support of this project, given the incidental benefits to the community in terms of the flooding mitigation. We are downhill, which when it rains is downstream, and when it rains hard is downriver from Prospect Park. And so the flooding benefits that this project will ameliorate are very welcome to our community.
Any other Borough Board members wish to speak on the matter? Hearing no other Borough Board members wishing to speak on the matter or ask questions, we'll proceed to the vote. As I said, as the point of order, it'll be Community Boards 6, 7, 8, 9, and 14 are permitted under the charter to vote on it, then the council members. So with that, I'll ask Ms. Church to call the roll as to those eligible to vote on this matter.
CB 6. Yes. CB 7. Yes. CB 8.
Yes.
CB 9.
CB9 votes in favor.
CB 14.
Yes.
Council members. Yeah, all the council members can vote here. 35. 37. 38. 39. 41. 42. 40. 43? 43? Oh, Stanley. You got that for me? 50.
Are there any other council members who appeared since, please?
Yes, from 33.
Your name again? I'm sorry. Emmett Sklar, right? Thank you.
The Brooklyn Borough President's Office abstains. The measure is adopted by the Borough Board by a tally of 12 yes, 0 no, with 3 abstentions. Chairperson Witherspoon, do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, can this presentation be forwarded to us?
Yes, absolutely. We now move on to a presentation, the analysis of the mayor's fiscal year 2025 budget by Tiana Garter of the Independent Budget Office. Before we get there, I'm going to make a chair's motion, given the public interest, and the chair's motion would be to permit, this is only a presentation, there's no voting item, but to be to permit members of the public who are here tonight to speak and ask questions of the Independent Budget Office. This is a chair's motion to allow members of the public to speak and ask questions of the Independent Budget Office, given the public interest in analysis of the mayor's fiscal budget. Is that motion second? Chairperson Pena, second. Does any Borough Board member object to adopting the motion to allow members of the public present to ask questions of the Independent Budget Office? Hearing no objections, motion carries. We will allow members of the public after the presentation to ask questions of the Independent Budget Office, but with that, please, Ms. Garter of the Independent Budget Office, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name's Tina Guarda. I'm the Chief Outreach and Engagement Officer of the Independent Budget Office. You might be wondering who we are. We are a nonpartisan city agency tasked with providing independent revenue and spending estimates after the November plan, prelim, and executive budgets. Our mission is to enhance understanding of New York City's budget, public policy, and economy through this independent analysis. Something I want to point out is that we do accept requests for research into budgetary matters. Recently, for example, we conducted a study on what it would cost the MTA to expand the Fair Fares program. And coming up, we're releasing a study looking at the various monies tied to points of agreements created during rezoning negotiations. Under the new leadership of Louisa Chafee, we are revamping our outreach efforts and trying to reach out to as many corners of New York City as we can to help the public understand the New York City budget and especially the implications of the budget on public policy and New Yorkers' lived experience. I thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. Brian Kane, our Assistant Director of Housing, Environment, and Infrastructure, is here to present IBO's analysis on New York City's preliminary budget for fiscal year 2025.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. As Tina said, I'm Brian Kane. I'm the Assistant Director for our Housing, Environment, and Infrastructure team, which also includes transportation and economic development. I'd also like to plug one more report as it's relevant to the previous discussion. We, in November, released a report on the potential impact, fiscal impact of stormwater fees in New York City, and so I recommend anyone interested in that topic to take a look. So yes, this is our analysis of the preliminary budget, which was released on January 16th. Anyone with a printed version of the slides, just note that there will be some differences between these and that this was just pared down a little bit and one slide was added, just to avoid confusion. So to start, I'd like to ground us in the budget cycle. So the fiscal year runs from July 1st to June 30th. We are currently in fiscal year 2024, which will end on June 30th. Before that date, a budget for the upcoming fiscal year, 2025, must be adopted by the mayor and city council. Leading up to every adopted budget, there are 3 financial plans that are essentially drafts of the upcoming budget and published by the mayor's office. This includes the November plan, the preliminary budget, which is published in January and is the topic of today's presentation, and the executive budget, which is published towards the end of April. If you note on this timeline, which is a little hard to see, but the star is where we are between preliminary and exec. So IBO is charter mandated to analyze these proposed budgets for the 3 mayoral financial plans, not for the adopted budget. With these mandated reports, we do 3 main things. First, we evaluate New York City's economy in the context of the national economy. That information then feeds into the second step, which is our independent revenue forecasts. And then the third aspect is our separate expense re-estimate. So we look at all the budget, all the major items in the expense budget, and we re-estimate ones that we think could be more accurate reflections of what will happen in the future. And I'll give some examples of that as we go through. The headline of this report is that IBO is anticipating an additional surplus of $2.8 billion over the Adams administration's estimates. This is mainly due to higher tax revenues than expected and lower than budgeted city funding. And to take a look at this, so in the first column, or the first 2 bars next to each other, we have in blue the IBO estimated surplus for 2024, and in purple the administration's estimate in the official preliminary budget. As you can see, ours is higher than theirs. That's the $2.8 billion additional surplus. What typically happens in the when we go between the current year and the next year is the surplus from the current year is applied to the next year because the city's budget has to balance out at 0. So even though 2025 looks like there is a negative right now, the 2024 surplus would be applied over there. And so for the administration, they're showing an exactly balanced budget for 2024 and 5, whereas we actually see an additional surplus over that of $3.3 billion in 2025. And then the out years are all showing deficits. They're relatively in line with the administration's, but none of them are too concerning to IBO because they're well within the range of deficits that we see in out years in the past and that the city has addressed. But we'll monitor them closely. So to talk about our economic projections, The chart on the left shows the new jobs added in 2023. The bar across the top is the actual number of jobs added to the city, which was 77,000 last year. The blue bars are IBO's estimates from the financial plans leading up to the end of 2023. And as you can see, we were pretty close to the mark on the actual number, or the actual estimate. The administration in purple was slightly more pessimistic about job growth, slightly more conservative in their estimate. And then we shift over to the other chart, and that's for the upcoming years, the current and the upcoming years. And in this case, actually, the optimism flips. The administration is becoming more optimistic about sustained job growth throughout the out years, whereas IBO is projecting some declines in job growth, yet still positive through 2028. This is our job forecast, this is job changes by sector since the beginning of the pandemic. And the two big things to note here are that the healthcare and human services sector saw a pretty large increase since the pandemic started, while the largest decreasing sector was the retail trade sector. And I'll also highlight the third largest decrease was in the government sector, and that's going to be relevant for one of our expense repricings in a few slides. So going into step 2 of the 3 parts that IBO does for every mandated report, this is our revenue forecast specifically for the city. And the bars on the left, the bar grouping on the left, is property taxes for each of the years in the financial plan. That is the largest source of city tax revenue. It's also IBO's largest estimated increasing source of tax revenues. Next largest is personal income tax, and then general sales, and so on. So this gives some context as to where city revenues come from. City taxes make up, I think it's about 70% roughly of total city revenues. Large sources of the rest of that is from the federal and state governments, and then some other smaller programs and fees and fines. So diving into the expense budget, which is where the real bulk of this presentation is, this is an overview of the administration's expense budget, what's in the actual preliminary budget for 2024. And as you can see, the education Department of Education is by far the largest agency budget. It makes up over a quarter of the entire budget of $116 billion. If you then include the top 5 agencies up here, which include education, social services, and then 3 centralized costs, which include healthcare for city workers, pensions, and debt service, that makes up 65% of the budget. So that's just to give some context for some of the larger agencies, and then all the other agencies have much smaller budgets than that. So as I said before, IBO re-estimates the budget for several items. Sometimes we think that the budget will need to be higher than it is, and sometimes we think it'll need to be lower than it's currently drafted. This first area, spending on civilian employees of the government, we anticipate the budget is actually higher than it needs to be. And this is largely because the administration is required to budget for all vacant positions, even if they don't expect to fill them by the end of the year. Because we know that most of those vacant positions are unlikely to be filled by the end of the year, we know the city won't have to spend that money, so we think that that will result in a reduction of the budget of about $1.6 billion. On the flip side of municipal workforce spending, so this is civilian employees, this table is for uniformed agencies. So this includes police, fire, sanitation, and corrections. And a very common element of uniform agencies' budgets is overtime spending. You may hear about this in the news quite a bit, but often overtime spending is under budgeted financial plans. And so IBO uses actual overtime spending to date plus past year's data and comes up with our own estimate. And it normally, as in this case, increases the overtime budget for uniform agencies. Next up is a very big topic, the asylum seeker services. As many of you have probably heard in the news, this is a big cost to the city, and estimating exactly how much it's going to cost is a very tricky thing because data is limited. I'm going to give a quick, because this is such an important topic, I'm going to give a quick timeline of budget information around this. So in the November plan, the previous draft of the budget, the administration kept their costs high. They kept their cost estimates as the estimate they made in the summer, which used data on cost and population from the summer. And then shortly after the November plan release, the administration announced a 20% reduction in those costs. IBO, in December, when we published our version of this report on the November plan, we incorporated those lower costs and the change in population estimates and ended up with a much lower, a notably lower estimate of the total cost over 2024 and 25 for asylum seeker services. And then shortly after that, once the preliminary budget was released, the administration reduced their estimates as well. Still, even after the administration reduced their estimates, IBO's estimates are $2.4 billion lower than the administration is showing in the preliminary budget. We're going to be watching this closely as the executive budget comes in, especially because the executive budget is when state funding is finalized, because they finalize their budget at the end of March. So we do expect our estimates will become more in line in that budget, but we're watching it closely. The next area that we repriced, that's a pretty large one, is City for HEPS. This is the city-funded rental housing voucher program. It's modeled after Section 8. It's one of the largest areas where IBO is projecting higher spending than budgeted. The administration added substantial funds for 2024 that were not in the budget in November. So in January, they added this purple large bar for 2024. The current preliminary budget for these out years, 2025 and onward, is just those small purple bars to the right of that tall one. This is emblematic of a very common occurrence in the city budget, where costs for a program that the city is pretty sure is going to need to be spent are not reflected in the budget. They're not baselined, if you've ever heard that term. And so what IBO often does is we look at historical spending and any information that's relevant or data that we can acquire, and we increase our estimate of the budget to reflect current spending, which is what we're doing here with those darker blue bars on the right. We're bringing up the estimate of out-year spending to the current year's budget. Second to last slide. So this is the Department of Education adjustments. As I said earlier, it's a very large budget, so it ends up receiving a lot of attention from our office. There's 5 re-estimates here. I'll highlight 2. One is COVID aid. So federal COVID stimulus came in 2021, and the Department of Education received a lot of those dollars. They funded several programs that are ongoing with money that is expiring in 2025. And so those projects need to be funded with either city dollars or another source of revenue. And so IBO increased our estimate of that budget with city dollars to maintain those programs. And then the other one that I will highlight is the state class size law. IBO recently released a report on this that will have a lot more detail than I can go into today. But essentially to comply with the new state class size law, the city will have to increase its budget. All right, and last slide before questions. The program to eliminate the gap is also something that's been in the news quite a bit lately. It was announced before the November plan that in all three financial plans, November preliminary and executive, agencies would need to find 5% of spending to cut. That cut occurred, or several cuts occurred in November. Between November and January, it was announced that the city was in better financial health than expected, so some of those cuts from November were restored. However, there were also additional cuts to other programs in January. And then on top of all of this, there are other adjustments and new needs which don't relate to the program to eliminate the gap, but they do affect the total budget. So the headline here is that 2 rounds of cuts still ended up leading to the city spending more money because the total budget increased by 7% since the adopted budget last June. So yeah, that's the end of our presentation, and we're happy to take questions.
All right. As approved by the Borough Board, we're opening up to questions both from Borough Board members and any member of the public in attendance tonight. Questions? Yes.
The uniform overtime slide looked like the projection for the following fiscal year will go, and you triggered that too.
Let me find that. That is a great question, and I'll have to check in with my office about that. It may be that we have more data on, well, we actually have any data on 2024 because we can see what's been spent. And so for out years, we often also look at past years to inform. And so what I'm guessing happened is 2024 was looking a little bit higher than the previous years, but we're putting 2024 and 2025 and the other out years in line with the past years. But I can get you more information.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry.
The question. Sure. Mr. Lambert, on behalf of Councilmember Mealy, pointed out that Banks, sorry. Ooh, I apologize. On behalf of Councilmember Banks, pointed out that the projection for costs for uniform officers, I should say, for 2025 was lower than this year. Mr. Lambert wanted to know what was that attributable to. The IBO just answered they have to they'll take a look at it and report back.
I'm actually sorry. Can I correct that? I realized I was misreading the table. Everything except for the light blue bar along the top is actually from the preliminary budget. That's from the administration. So it's the administration that actually has 2025 budgeted slightly lower than 24. And this chart actually includes all uniform personnel services spending, not just overtime. So we're showing at the very top blue bars what our estimate does to the total uniform personnel services budgets.
Chairperson Baptiste.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Please correct me if I'm mistaken. I think that you said that one of the estimates for IBO was that there was going to be higher property tax revenue?
Just to repeat the question, it's to clarify that the IBO expects higher property tax revenue. And yes, we believe that property tax revenue is one of the largest areas of growth that we'll see in the coming years.
What's the basis of that expectation of more revenues from property tax?
I'd have to put you in touch with our economics team. They lead these analyses. I'm sorry, off the top of my head, I don't know. Oh, do you Tina knows?
I've heard a lot of presentation on the property tax, so we can still get actual numbers to you, but I know that IBO estimates a greater growth in office in commercial property tax, not as high a growth as there was pre-COVID. It is, we estimate like a 2% growth, where before COVID it was at a 6% growth. And so that's accounting for what, but the administration is counting for even a lower growth of that commercial property tax. And the administration also expects, I believe, a larger amount of people who may not pay their taxes. There's always some delinquency, and we expect a lower rate of delinquency. But I can get more numbers in terms of breaking those down for you.
First Vice Chair Caesar.
Yeah, so thank you very much for the presentation. And so I'm curious, by any chance, if IBO has also looked into, I believe, there was something between the New Jersey Department of Education and co-op regarding using officers for the impartial hearings.
I'm sorry, between Department of Education and who?
I think co-op, like, I think it's OATH, I forget what the stands for.
Oh, Oath, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yes. I'm wondering if IBO, when you're looking at some of the particular, use cases regarding shifts, I'm wondering if both and the New Jersey Department of Ed, in regards to the impartial hearings, if that was something that IBO has also looked at.
Are you referring to Carter cases or different?
Would the Carter cases fall under impartial hearings?
The hearings I'm not sure about.
I'm wondering if you're asking about the hearings that are done for people who have children who are students with disabilities, and if the Department of Education does not have a program that addresses the disability of a certain student, then those parents can go search for those services elsewhere, and the Department of Education has to reimburse them. But it's done through a hearing process that we refer to as Carter. I mean, it's referred to as Carter cases. I'm curious if that's what you're. And the lawyers who look at those cases, that's administered through. That's done under oath. The Office of, yeah. And so I'm not sure if that's what you're.
That may be because I remember at one point, like, everyone was hurting, right? And so the rate of impartial hearings was higher than the DOE had lawyers for, so then both came in, and there was basically a percentage of cases that were then funneled to both.
Yeah, and so that is an area that we regularly reestimate to be to incur higher costs than the administration in its preliminary budget usually allots for. And I believe that the amount spent on those cases hit $1 billion, I believe, last year. So we regularly estimate that it will. I'm pretty sure that is one of the areas that we estimated to grow as well this year, and it is something we regularly see happening.
And we did also recently release a report on that same topic, so I encourage you to Google that. Thank you.
Mr. Cerna.
Going back to the asylum seeker cost, I see one of the bullet points giving awareness that if you estimate 3 scenarios for the total cost of the asylum seekers, can you go over what those 3 scenarios are? And I do recall you saying that it is hard to project costs because a lot of information wasn't available. What information are you missing, and why?
Oh, sorry, I'll repeat the questions first. So it's on asylum seekers, and the first question was about the 3 cost scenarios that IBO projected and why we projected 3. And then the other question was on what data might be missing. So to the first question, we came up with a low, medium, and high cost scenario based on the projected population and projected costs of providing services to asylum seekers, which I guess this gets to question 2. They're just very nebulous. It's very hard to know exactly what we're going to be spending because it's all emergency spending, or a lot of it's emergency spending, and it's historicals can only inform so much because over time we do expect costs to typically go down. But by how much is a question. And then the population is also just very, very hard to project forward. So it's when I say data missing, it's more just the fact that we don't have enough data because this hasn't been happening for many years, enough years where we can actually look back and then project forward with that data. So yeah, when we came up with 3 scenarios, it was to try to capture a range of possibilities. All 3 of ours, if I'm remembering correctly, were, even the highest estimate was lower than the administration's estimate.
Other questions or comments to the IBO? Seeing none other, seeing no other questions or comments, thank you so very much for this presentation.
Thank you. Oh, can I say one more quick thing?
Sure.
Sorry. Please reach out to us with any requests or questions you have. We left some cards out on the table if that's helpful. But yeah, if you reach out to anyone at IBO, we can guide you to the right person. It's not a big office. So thank you very much.
Any updates from Borough Board members? Yes, First Vice Chair. This is the Borough Board member, yep. Any members, it's your time to inform us.
Okay, fantastic. And so, folks, good evening. And so, just announcement that tomorrow, March 6th, at the Flatbush YMCA, basically just before you hit Farragut on Flatbush, we are having Free Board 14 in celebration of Reynoso, a beloved member who unfortunately passed away. We are doing our 17th annual youth conference. And so, we're going to have over maybe 50 community-based organizations there. Currently, about 300 high school age youth have registered, and the whole point of this from 4 to 7 p.m. is for them to come in, see what local community opportunities are there. Also, if folks are not aware, the SYP application was extended to March 15th, and so organizations could also try and enroll those students and let them know about that through it. And another thing is that there is a period of that time where we do have volunteers who will come in to do mock interviews. And so letting people know, anyone you know of high school age, tell them to come to Flatbush Y just before Farragut, tomorrow, 4 p.m. to 7 p.m.
It's really fun.
Thank you.
Thank you for that update. Any other updates from Borough Board members? Chairperson Baptiste.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to bring to the Borough Board's attention, so the SUNY Chancellor had announced a transformation plan for SUNY Downstate, which is the only teaching hospital in downstate, and it's located here in Brooklyn. So from the details that have been provided, it sounds like they are looking to close the current campus. They've said that it's been running a deficit, I think it's over $100 million of debt that's run, and there are a substantial number of issues that are wrong with the campus. That they say that it's going to be cost prohibitive to repair or to build a new hospital. But the speed of this plan is worrying, for one. Plus, also the impacts to the borough. Downstate has a catchment of over 1.2 million residents. So this is really rapid. There has really been very little room left for discussion. They're talking about this is something that is looking to be approved by the April 1st for the state budget, which really doesn't allow any time for any engagement with the community. As a board chair, I've been invited to public engagement sessions, but I think we've left with more questions than answers. So we are currently planning, we're in communication with Community Board 17, to try and hold an emergency town hall, because we think that's important to the public engagement, where we really understand what's at stake and what the options are we really have as opposed to being forced to take basically $500,000, sorry, $500 million, and I don't mean to understate that, but to replace the teaching hospital, we're talking about basically what you're putting what a council almost like the low priority urgent care, and they're paying off capacity. So we are going to be reaching out. We will be reaching out to fellow chairs as well, because again, this is not just a 17 or a 9 issue. This is something that really affects healthcare in the borough, and we need to. The borough deserves that kind of discussion when we talk about strategically what are we trying to do.
Thank you. Other updates from Borough Board members? Chairperson Liquidius.
13 has just received their first cannabis, legal cannabis location. We're going to have a meeting with our elected officials tomorrow regarding this location because it's right across the street from the Newton area. This is one of the locations that we timed. We're hoping that we can reverse it. We understand that there are locations, they have to have locations legal in within the areas, but this location
So, no, we appreciate that. Just so I mean, it is the will of the Borough Board. I can almost suggest that you've made a motion on that regard, just to let everyone know how the process works. For us to host here, we do have to check with DCAS facilities, like any other public building, the Department of Citywide Administrative Services works, so we can check and circulate other possibilities if there is a sense that we would not make quorum. I do know that that is not ideal. It is better to be resolved tonight by motion, but we would have to check ahead of time, and we do not have that information currently. But thank you for raising that issue. So we'll check with DCAS facilities and suggest other dates. Of course, we know one of the reasons why it's better resolved at a meeting is that most nights are occupied by other business for our community boards and council members. So, but unfortunately, absent that information from facilities, we cannot propose a date. But just I do acknowledge the point raised, Chairperson Enrique Diaz. Other updates? Hearing no other updates, oh yes, please, Chairperson Loman.
I just want to bring to the borough's attention that I still have not to date 1 year as the chair received my email address yet. And I think that's a little ridiculous.
Thank you for updating us on that. Any other updates from Borough Board members? Hearing no other updates, is there any other business? This is the section of the meeting where if anyone wants to make a motion on anything, this would be the time to do it. Any member wants to make a motion, I should say. There is no need for that one because it's part of the agenda. So hearing that there is no other motion, sorry, Chairperson Baptiste.
Very quickly, we'll all just announce previously that the window for the application is closed. Just for planning purposes, do you have any expectation, is there any idea when new members will be and old members will?
We will report that. The charter requires it happen by March 31st.
We're working to that.
And that remains the target in compliance with the charter. Is there any, I said this is the new business segment, any other lasting comments? Hearing none. As the colloquy with Chairperson Enrique Diaz noted, we are scheduled to be back here on Tuesday, April 2nd. An issue has been noted. We'll learn from facilities, circulate dates. If we can change the date, we'll do that. If it doesn't work for at least the majority of those who would be able to be here, we'll stick to at least the scheduled date of April 2nd. If it's not April 2nd, we'll see you sometime in April, very soon. And with that, may you all have a good evening. The meeting is adjourned.